The Ukrainian government is hoping to resume exports of grain from the Black Sea port of Odessa despite a Russian missile strike yesterday.
The grain has immense importance not only to Ukraine, but the rest of the world, as every continent is being hit hard by the lack of exports from a country often called the breadbasket of Europe.
Yoshiko Herrera, professor of political science at UW-Madison and Russian expert, joins us once again. Good to see you again.
Hi, Yoshiko. Good to see you.
Hi, thank you. Nice to be here.
As we mentioned earlier in the show, the Ukraine war is not in the headlines, the top of the headlines, but it's still raging on. What's the latest?
Well, yeah, it's now 5 months. The Russians have made a lot of gains in the east, but there are some potential changes in the future because of the weapons being supplied by the West. And I think in the port city of Kherson, in the next few weeks, we'll see some important developments if the Ukrainians are able to push the Russians out of this important port city in the south. And as you also mentioned, the grain shipment issue is important in terms of addressing food shortages around the world, getting the grain out of Ukraine. But that process, while there was a deal, the Russians the very next day bombed the port city of Odessa. So that's sort of a one step forward, one step or two steps even back.
So is there a potential that the grain deal could still collapse?
Yes, although there's a lot of parties that are interested in getting this grain out of Ukraine, including the Ukrainians. So at the moment, Ukrainians have not decided to back out of the deal. And the idea is to have the grain shipped out of Ukraine and then the ships inspected in Turkey by an international group. So right now, it looks like that is still supposed to happen. But Russia's bombing of Odessa less than 24 hours after the deal sort of sends a signal to people to remind everyone that Russia is not very trustworthy.
How important is this grain to the rest of the world?
Well, a lot of countries in the Middle East and North Africa actually rely on this grain. And as you know, people in Wisconsin know, and in the U.S., there's inflation. Inflation is actually worse in some other countries, and that's partly because of rising prices on food and other commodities. So the grain is important to, and there's climate change, there's drought, so there's lots of reasons why this grain is important that have traditionally relied on it, but especially now given rising prices and climate change related shortages in other places.
This is sort of a simplified question, but is there a way 5 months in to determine who is winning this war? And are there any signs at all that the conflict may be coming to an end?
Well, in terms of winning, I think that the war has been just a tremendous loss for people in Ukraine, for the economy of Ukraine, in the short term. It's a loss for Russia in terms of the long-term political and economic system of the country is severely damaged. So there's a lot of losses. But in terms of war and military victories, I still am of the view that Ukraine is going to eventually win, but it's going to be at great cost. So we're sort of in a costly phase. I think that the important thing that's going to be determinative is how successful the Ukrainians are in using the long-range artillery systems, that the HIMARS systems that they're getting from the United States and other Western countries, because there's a lot of reports they've been able to target Russian supply areas and ammunition depots. And the more that they can do that, the more difficult it is for Russia to hold the territory that they have taken. So in order for Ukraine to win, they have to actually take back territory, not just sort of hold the line, which they have generally been doing. So I think that we're going to see the effects of these long-range artillery systems, and hopefully that will make a difference. But right now, Russia is very committed to continuing to punish Ukraine and continuing with the sort of absurd goal of trying to deny Ukrainian sovereignty and nationhood.
And the destruction and death continues. Yoshiko, thanks for being with us again. We'll check in sooner than later.
Great to see you, Yoshiko. Thank you so much.